top story this hour, the Supreme Court has ordered relief for acid attack victims across the country. It has said that state governments must pay 3 lakh rupees compensation to acid attack victims and says the amount of this amount, 1 lakh rupees, must be paid within 15 days. The court has also ruled that the cost of medical treatment and rehabilitation of the acid attack victim must be borne by the state government. CNN IBN had been running a campaign highlighting the plight of acid attack victims. Joining us for more, our National Bureau Chief Bhupendra Chaubey. Bhupendra, what's significant is the timeline that the Supreme Court has set within which the governments have to respond?
Well, the Supreme Court has gone by the provisions of the Poison Act, and it has asked all states to ensure that any victim of an acid attack who lodges a complaint with the police station must necessarily be given the sum of 1 lakh rupees within 15 days from the time of reportage. There are many who have raised this question as to where this money will come from and how will states, for instance, states like Uttar Pradesh and Chhattisgarh or even Jharkhand, where the number of acid attack cases which have taken place according to government's own statistics have been steadily rising. Where will this money come from? The court has asked the states to figure this out in coordination with the center. But effectively what the court has done is that it has said that this sum of 1 lakh rupees must be given within 15 days out of a total compensation of 3 lakhs. How will the money part of this be managed is something for the states to work out with the center. Also important to highlight here that there are some states like Chhattisgarh, for instance, who have already taken some steps to ensure that those who report, who come out and lodge a complaint against an acid attack, are given some kind of monetary relief as soon as possible.
Just to draw your attention to more news that's coming from the Supreme Court, it seems the court has also set guidelines to deal with such cases, also to deal with the sale of acid. It says acid can't be sold to anyone without a photo identity card, and that it cannot be sold to anyone who's below 18 years of age.
Well, the reason again for that is that the Supreme Court the question before the Supreme Court was straightforward. The Supreme Court was abreast with this question that how can you really control illegal sale of acid? The number of cases, as we were pointing out, of acid attacks taking place across the country had been rising. Should there be a guideline? Should there be a straightforward law which should be implemented by the center to ban all forms of acid in everywhere? That was the question which was being raised. The court quite clearly laying down guidelines, ensuring that anyone who's caught selling acid illegally would be fined of 50,000 rupees, no sale of acid to be taking place with any individual who's below 18 years of age.
All right, to stay with us, Bhupen, joining us also our legal correspondent Ashok Bagaria from the Supreme Court. Ashok, take us through what else the Supreme Court had to say.
Well, this is a long list of guidelines which has been laid down by the Supreme Court, but the most important thing is that these are just interim guidelines, because the central government approached the Supreme Court saying that they had already made some draft rules, but it will take some time to implement and notify them. So the Supreme Court today has made interim arrangements saying that unless these draft rules are notified, these guidelines will be in place. Now these interim guidelines are basically done to regulate the sale of acid, as well as provide some sort of a compensation mechanism for acid attack victims. The most important clause that the Supreme Court has made in these guidelines are a minimum of 3 lakh compensation which shall be given to acid attack victims. And importantly, the Supreme Court also saying that of this rupees 3 lakh, 1 lakh rupees will have to be given to the victim within 15 days, and the rest of the 2 lakh rupees should be given within 2 months. So the Supreme Court is saying that within 2 months, the whole compensation amount of 2 lakh has to be paid to the acid attack victim. The next important thing is that the Supreme Court has fixed responsibility on the chief secretaries of the respective states to oversee the fact that these guidelines are not violated, and more importantly, they are implemented. Thereafter, the Supreme Court has regulated the sale of acid by saying that only licensed and registered retailers will be able to sell acid. All retailers selling acids will have to maintain a register. No sale shall be completed without the purchaser having a photo identity card. Moreover, the court has also said that no sale of acid shall be made to a person who is below 18 years of age. And in case these rules and interim arrangements are violated, this will invite a fine of rupees 50,000.
Ashoka, who has the Supreme Court made responsible in this case? The state governments?
Well, in this particular case, it will both be the center, the state government, the union territories, all of them will be responsible, because the Supreme Court has said that all the administrative heads of these three wings of the government, or the three parts of the government, will be responsible. For instance, at the state level, they have made the chief secretaries. At the union territory level, they have made the administrative heads to be responsible for implementation of this guideline.
Also, again, just for a clarification, you said these are interim guidelines, and the guidelines should be again worked out by the state governments, the framework of those guidelines?
Well, actually what had really happened was that the central government or the Home Ministry had called a meeting of all the state governments on the framing of guidelines for acid attack victims. Now, the central government informed the Supreme Court through the Solicitor General, saying that the central government was in the process of framing the draft rules, and in fact they had framed the draft rules on the last occasion. They had submitted a copy of the draft rule to the Supreme Court, but at the same time also said that they are yet to invite comments from the state government, as well as the whole process of notifying these draft rules will take time. So the Supreme Court said that till it takes time, till these draft rules are notified, there has to be some mechanism in place in the interim period which will regulate the sale of acid, as well as work out a mechanism for providing compensation to acid attack victims. So today, that particular order has been passed. The Supreme Court has made interim guidelines to protect and regulate the sale of acid. They are saying that acid cannot be sold to anybody without a valid photo identity card. Acid will not be sold to anybody who is below 18 years of age. Retailers selling acid will have to maintain a register wherein they will record the name and address of the person they are selling acid to, as well as for what purpose they are selling to. Besides this, the Supreme Court also fixing the responsibility on the chief secretaries of the state governments to see that these guidelines which have been framed by the Supreme Court are implemented. Moreover, the Supreme Court has directed all the state governments that within 1 week these guidelines have to be circulated in the district, as well as wide publicity has to be given to these guidelines by publishing them in vernacular dailies.
All right, so there are two things that the Supreme Court has worked on today. One is to prevent acid attacks and therefore regulate the sale of acid. The other is to address the needs and the concerns of the victims and their families. The Supreme Court, Ashok Bakaria, also setting a timeline within which the government must respond. Either compensation must come, at least part of it must come within the first 15 days.
Well, that's what the Supreme Court has said, that number one, it has fixed that a minimum of rupees 3 lakh will be given as compensation to any acid attack victim. Of that rupees 3 lakh, 1 lakh rupee will have to be disbursed by the state government within 15 days, so that that 1 lakh rupee covers the medical expenses of the victim as well as the rehabilitation needs of the victim. The rest of the 2 lakh rupees will be disbursed to the victim in 2 months. So in a sense, the court has fixed a maximum ceiling of 2 months' time to disburse 3 lakh rupees compensation to acid attack victims.
All right, Ashok.